Reconstructionist Radio presents a War Room production. The Postmil Report with Nathan F. Conkey.
Hello and welcome to the 33rd edition of the Postmil Report with yours truly, Nathan Conkey. And I didn't pick that title in case you were wondering. So I want to tell you about last Wednesday. Why? Well, because it was a little recon miniature. It was a beautiful miniature of Christian reconstruction, of the slow and steady and quite ordinary growth of Christ's kingdom. Why do I want to do this? Well, I want to address some misconceptions on the part of those who have maybe glanced at Christian reconstruction out of one eye and assumed 90% of what we must believe and ended up believing that we want to take over the civil government and institute some sort of a dictatorship, and to correct some misconceptions on the part of the malicious who have made the same mistake as the ignorant but only have done so in print whilst swearing blind that, honest governor, I read all them theonomic books. I want to address misunderstandings too on the behalf of those who are sympathetic and who are starting to read and think and pray through the issues that a victorious faith for all of life worldview addresses. The misconception on the latter part is that we can change just one thing. It's only natural to try to change one thing when one engages in something so radical as questioning one's own worldview. So here's an example of changing just one thing. Now, many are attracted to the post-millennial Faith for All of Life camp by, quite frankly, the mind-blowing, earth-shattering, super-impactful books written by Rushdoony and Banson and Perks and North and others. These people who are attracted are often big readers and often very principled men. Previously, they read fat tomes on Tulip and argued vigorously with their ignorant Arminian friends on Facebook. Now they read post-millennial books and argue with their ignorant, pessimillennial, antinomian, anomian chums on Facebook. The punchline is, covenantal postmillennialism and the Faith for All of Life demands that you turn your whole life in the least aspect to the greatest upside down so that it is pleasing to the will of God as revealed in His law word in the Old and New Testaments. Just to change the books that you read and keep on living in accordance with the rationalism, escapism, and reductionism of the frankly pagan outlook of the evangelical and reformed faith won't cut it. On the other hand, others are so daunted by the thought of the ethical changes necessary for our lives to be pleasing to God, so conscious of their own sin and weakness, that they forget the grace of God. They forget that the covenant of God is a gracious covenant that begins with our redemption and then brings us to Mount Sinai to hear the law of perfect liberty. So, back to Wednesday, with the rather uninspiring view of three men in a room in Puebla, talking to one man in another room somewhere in South America about stuff in Spanish over a rather poor internet Skype connection. Here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to start by telling you what was exciting about the meeting, the benefits, as it were. Then I'm going to tell you what it cost us to meet together, the costs. Then I'll close out by emphasizing why such a meeting was only possible by those with a comprehensive faith and an optimistic eschatology. At least I think I'm going to do that. So, who was in the room with me? My friends and colleagues and brothers, Misael and Ricardo. And on the other end of the line was, let's call him Pedro, who is the director of a Bible college/seminary thing somewhere in South America. So what did we talk about? After the social pleasantries, we talked about some pretty substantive stuff. Firstly, Pedro is a Faith for All of Lifer who knows that God is on the throne in heaven, reigning on the earth, and that righteousness, as defined by God and His law in the Old and New Testaments, exalts a nation. He loves his country and sees with the eyes of faith the impact of the gospel of the kingdom could make. Our new amigo, Pedro, wants us to come and give what would be the first Faith for All of Life conference in his country. He wants us to talk on biblical economics, Christ and the civil government, Christ, the truth, and education. This is the stock and trade of the Bible and of Christian Reconstructionists. Pretty exciting, don't you think? So what about the upside? What's the potential impact given the long-term outlook of the faith for all of lifers? Well, the upside is nothing short of planting the seeds that will lead to the discipling and baptizing of that nation as a nation, one by one, from the leaders and readers on down, as the gospel of the kingdom is proclaimed. If that sounds pretentious, remember two things. Number one, if you don't aim at discipling a nation, you will never hit your target. Evangelical missionaries are vociferously opposed to the discipling of the nations. They are enamored with, and even benefit financially from, the socialistic, state for all of life, messianic civil governments in their sending countries, and they apply this outlook to their exegesis and their mission practices. So, number two, why is this perhaps not pretentious? Well, once expressed and put into practice, what is better? What is more productive, more just, more blessed than the covenant of God applied to civil government, applied to economics, education, sales, marketing, and 1,000 other things? The law has a God-glorifying missionary element baked into the cake. Who can stop the nation discipling will of God except the covenantal unfaithfulness of the people of God? Probably not Conor McGregor. So we also talked about education with young Pedro. I didn't quite pick it up exactly, but he wants to start a day school and needs help with curriculum in the Bible college, I think, that he's responsible for. I think, although I couldn't easily follow his Spanish, but certainly he's interested in help starting a K through 12 school. So that's cool. And the upside should be obvious. The upside of starting a Faith for All of Life school is 1, then 2, then 3, then a dozen, then hundreds of individual lives and families changed through the power of the Word of God, echoing down through the generations. So what did we do? Well, we just talked. We listened, we encouraged, we prayed. Not very exciting. So let's consider the costs. What were the economic costs of the meeting? Well, we used Skype to talk, and that didn't cost anything. We used my second-hand laptop, but that was already a sunk cost. We use electricity and internet, for which we pay a monthly fee, but that wasn't much. Now, we also gave up some of our time, about an hour each, which is an economic resource, but essentially the meeting in financial terms cost us nothing. But what about the other, more substantial costs? What did it cost Misa? Well, Misa comes from a church background which is essentially Unitarian. He had to break with his church family and run the gauntlet in his own family to embrace Orthodox Christianity. And once he embraced an optimistic eschatology and a biblical worldview in public in a dispensationalist seminary, it almost cost him his degree. 3 years of work were almost flushed down the loo. So, in brief, what did it cost me to be at the meeting? Well, embracing a faith for all of life Christianity, including postmillennialism, this is the Postmil report after all, cost me a lot of friction in my family. It has meant that I had to move to find opportunities to work in my calling in a school that shared my worldview. It has meant committing to 5 years' work in a foreign culture, which speaks a foreign language, and where you can't even buy Marmite. What about Ricardo and Pedro? Ricardo has paid his dues as well. Pedro knows that inviting a Christian Reconstructionist, or a bunch of them, known Faith for All of Lifers as it were, could jeopardize his position in his Bible college, along with the prestige and influence and monthly paycheck that brings. Now, perhaps you are finding this rather banal and lackluster. Perhaps you're right to think in such terms, but there's something you must know. This is one example of how the kingdom advances. One Facebook friend suggests another friend to get in contact with you. You follow up, you talk, and things happen by the grace of God. But what's so special about 4 guys chatting to one another? Pretty much nothing. The thing that makes a difference is that God is in it, of course. We have the common faith to be able to help one another without the necessity of a directing institution telling us what to do and how to do it. I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch. I don't know what's going to happen, but By the grace of God, we have a common faith. We don't need convincing that God is Lord of Latin America and that Christian education is a vital plank of the kingdom building enterprise. And we are ready to help as time and energy and funds and calling and opportunity permit. Plus, we're kind of like a team, like the A-team perhaps. Each of us has our calling, our speciality, and our weaknesses. So let me tell you what I was thinking as I was listening to and trying to understand what Pedro was saying. I was thinking several things at once. Oh boy, my Spanish needs to improve, and I need to step up production on my online English program to be able to help these guys. And I wonder how I could record the video and audio for all the talks, and how much does a flight to blah country cost? And boy, I hope this guy doesn't lose his job. Okay, maybe this was not interesting to you, but perhaps it should be. Let me put a bow on my thinking here. Number one, Christianity is not about taking over the civil government as is, nor is it about changing the books you read. Number two, the kingdom progresses day by day, imperceptibly, as the Spirit leads. Number three, there is a cost to building the kingdom. Are you willing to give up your job, perhaps? Your prestige? Create friction in your family? But there's also an upside in the long term and the short term. Think of that as you weigh your decision. Number five, work on your speciality, whatever that may be. Public speaking or education or business or whatever that is. So if you would like to be part of the team that is working to build the intellectual foundations for the future Christian civilization in Latin America, contact me at cten.org/Nathan Conkey, where you can make a tax-deductible donation. Let's encourage one another to build the kingdom in South America, in our little corner of the world, and everywhere. God bless you, and have a smashing week now.
The Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network brings to you a complete lineup of podcasts where you will hear practical and tactical theology. Our desire is not simply that you consume our shows, but that you also live out your faith in every area of life. We can talk all day long about these things, but if we fail to put them into practice, then we fail as ambassadors of Jesus Christ, our King. Subscribe now to your favorite Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network shows, or you can subscribe to the Reconstructionist Radio Master Feed, where all of the content we produce, including the audiobooks and audio articles, will pop up as soon as they are available. And don't forget to visit ReconstructionistRadio.com to volunteer as a narrator or to partner with this ministry financially. May the Holy Spirit stir you into action for Christ and His kingdom